Greg was a sweet man, although his appearance made those who didn't know him understandably wary. He must have been in his late 40s or early 50s, but he had a childlike way about him in his ratty old bomber jacket covered in fighter plane patches. His hair, long and gray and balding at the front, was always combed back. It exposed his long, tan face as he flashed goofy smiles at his favorite girls. He was usually in his booth, any booth away from the tables, although he preferred the ones flanking the old smoking room. Otherwise, he'd meet you at the martini stage making small talk as he finished folding a meticulous B-52 or Concourse out of dollar bills and Scotch tape. Sometimes he sat in the stairwell leading down to the men's room if he was really running behind on his origami that night. It was the only place in the club with overhead lighting. He would casually reach into his jacket as he was talking to you, revealing tiny rows of pre-cut tape along the edge of his inside pocket. He approached his craft like a bird watcher in the field, and in appreciating the meticulous care he took, I could almost forget that the field was a strip club and the subjects were the girls. Rumor had it that Greg had some kind of autism spectrum disorder. We guessed at the details of his life outside the club during the slow hours of the early evening. London claimed he lived with his mother, said he'd let it slip once in conversation, and then changed the subject and never mentioned it again. She gets money from the state, London said with authority. She must, because he spends all the money he makes as a bicycle repairman here at the club. I never found out where his passion for origami came from, but for the longest time, I saved everything he gave me. Rings and airplanes mostly, sometimes an airplane taped to a ring, once 2 airplanes taped to a little dollar bill pedestal attached to a ring, a stiff mess of fingerprints trapped in Scotch tape. These miniature money sculptures filled the bottom 6 inches of my locker at the club. When I finally took them apart, there was over $100 in singles and $2 bills. The stubborn bills refused to lay flat, retaining their memory as fighter planes and paper jewelry. Greg loved airplanes. Fat little bombers, long, thin jet planes. He'd point out the differences enthusiastically as if each time was the first. It was London who introduced me to Greg after I'd asked about him. She told me he brought his favorite girls gifts and that I could get him to bring me whatever music, books, or movies I wanted. He even bought Rochelle a diamond bracelet once and gave it to her with a receipt for $4,000. He started by leaving small tips and Japanese candies at my stage, half sacrificial offering, half courtship ritual. Once I got to know Greg better, I became a part of his regular rotation. At least once a week, he brought something for me. He bribed the house mom to share girls' schedules with him, and he planned his visits accordingly. If I didn't see him Monday, I knew I'd see him by Wednesday. Greg made me promise to tell you he'd be in with a present for you tomorrow, London would laugh offhandedly. Best Buy didn't have Ghost Rider on Blu-ray, so he had to make a trip to Target or something. I pantomimed the gift opening process with enthusiasm because I figured it was what made him happiest, watching us appreciate his gifts. He kept the receipt from every purchase, taping it to the front of each CD and DVD case. He bundled each of our gifts in a small plastic bag and tied a bow with the handles, never a knot, so that they were easy for us to open without damaging our fancy manicures. Happy holidays, Holly, from Jolly G. The small torn binder paper label taped to the bag might say. Or, for Holly, Tuesday night, Happy Greg. Each was meticulously penned with a name, a date, and a salutation. Sometimes he adorned them with hearts or smiley faces. For Christmas, he brought me a Blu-ray DVD player with a drawing of a Christmas tree. Everything had a system for Greg, from the origami tips he gave to the exact number of table dances he planned on getting, and who he planned on getting them with, all preordained by some secret Greg logic. He organized his money in an envelope. I never once saw him with a wallet. In the envelope, 20s with tips were paper-clipped in a collated fashion, groups of paper-clipped bills carefully rubber-banded together by the day he planned to spend them. Sometimes the groups of bills even had names on them, reminders in case he forgot who he was supposed to dance with that night. It was as if Greg felt more of a responsibility to us than we did to him. Through his pathological study of us, Greg learned each girl's taste in film. Holly likes Audrey Hepburn in bad action movies. London likes Lady Gaga in drag films. On one occasion, he took a gamble and brought me a grindhouse double feature with sordid stories of lesbian vampires and punk rock horror tales. I thought you might like these because of your style, he said, nodding at my fishnets and latex skirt. Greg would call us over to his booth, smiling and waving from across the floor, or else he would send the previous girl to get the next one, like a patron holding an audience. Usually when he brought me something, I would talk to him for a couple of songs before bowing out to put away my presents or fix my makeup. Otherwise, Greg could hold you captive with his conversation for the better part of an hour. Sometimes a regular would text or send a floor host to get me. And I would end up sitting at a table or in a champagne room for the rest of the night, carrying around a carefully packaged copy of the latest Twilight novel or action thriller, hoping I wouldn't have to explain Greg's gifts for fear of the other customers passing judgment on him. His taste in girls was arbitrary. Greg had no type. I don't even think his interest in us was sexual. I never knew how to dance for him, but I knew I wanted him to enjoy it more than most people I danced for. I knew I wanted him to feel my appreciation or approval or whatever it was that he was seeking. Wondering why he came to the club bothered me, maybe because it made me wonder why I was there too. "What did Greg bring us this week?" my roommates would ask when they saw the carefully packaged plastic bags in the living room. Books, movies, and CDs piled up until my drawers were full. The majority of them sat unopened, still bearing their notes, time-stamped by a man I could never tell if I was humoring or disrespecting. I simultaneously wished he would stop coming to the club in the first place, and hoped that if it was what made him really happy, that his illusions were never shattered. Eventually, I moved in with my boyfriend and decided that there was no place in our home for Greg's gifts. I peeled the receipts and handwritten labels from each small blue plastic case and stacked them neatly into shopping bags. I wadded the old paper and bits of tape into a sticky ball and tossed it unceremoniously into the trash with last night's food scraps. That weekend, I stood at the buying counter of the used record store as each of Greg's gifts was stacked coldly according to resale value. The sum total of his offerings amounted to $45 in store credit, which I've never been able to spend. The folded receipt lives in my wallet next to the $7 I made during my first audition.